Hello, I'm Andrew Rogers. I'm a KESS-funded PhD student at Bangor University. My research is in the field of community development for health, and I'm using realist research methodology to unpack the black box of how community development works to produce health outcomes. I'm trying to work out what actually works, for whom, and in what context within the whole of North Wales. I've been asked today to talk about partnerships and wellbeing, and how partnerships work to produce sustainable development. I'm going to focus on two particular aspects. I'm going to talk about communicating your own perspective of well-being and integrating that with other partners. I'm also going to talk about the concept of the dance that we need to play around partnerships. It's really important to recognise that partnerships are always dynamic, and it's not just about what you do in a partnership, it's about how you react to what other partners do as well. So I'm just going to use a project that I'm involved in at the moment, which is the Wellbeing Hub in the Untitled Valley, to talk through some of the partnership issues that we need to consider. So bear with me a few seconds and I'll just set up a slideshow. So my theme is dancing with partners around the wellbeing agenda, and it's all about giving and taking and trying to find the win-win between partners. In the Untitled Valley, which is a rural area of largely deprivation in North Wales, there's been an issue for quite a long time in terms of well-being in the area. From a personal health point of view, the statistics have been going the wrong way. There's increasing inequalities in health, and the life expectancy improvements that we've seen are starting to halt or even go backwards, and healthy life expectancy is falling. And there's also been a real demand from the community itself for better wellbeing services. And that started with an understanding of GP-type services, primary care services. That's where the conversation started. And the demand was really for Welsh-speaking services to be delivered. There was a real lack of, in particular, Welsh-speaking GPs. So this started a community conversation that began about 5 or 6 years ago. And it's built up and built up and built up into something that's very different from where it started from it being about health as a clinical issue and around language issues, to now every aspect of well-being is part of the conversation. And the innovation that we're working on at the moment is to develop something called the Wellbeing Hub for the Untitled Valley. And this is something that will integrate the wellbeing services that are already in place, but also build upon some ideas around sustainability and resilience for the area for the future. And doing that by redressing every aspect of health, not just clinical services, but also the environment, improving an environment, putting emphasis onto the development of learning activities and teaching activities around well-being. So some real health promotion stuff going on, but also raising the ambitions of people locally to work in health and social care, and looking at all the other things that can be done around health, such as community development activities, arts activities. So this idea started to coalesce around all partners and all agencies across the Untitled Valley. All wanted to do something towards well-being. Some wanted to do stuff around well-being for individual health and family health. Some people, it was about well-being in terms of well-being of the economy, to try and get a more vibrant economy moving in the area again. Other agencies were interested in the environment, the physical environment of the Untitled Valley, this old slate mining area, and how did we protect heritage, but also build in a better environment for the future. But the one key thing that held everybody together was this idea of having a centre for well-being, which is all about positive things and about growth and about positive change and resilience, and what services would need to come together. The anchor point being the reformation of primary care services, so a new GP surgery, but a GP surgery that was sat straight next to leisure facilities, straight next to and on the same campus as arts and theatre, as well as a library, as well as an internet connection hub to connect to all the other different services around. So this project is active right at the moment, and we still haven't yet got a full picture or image of what all the services are going to be in there together. We're right at the moment, as we stand in July 2020, at the end of this, well, at the end of the start of the pandemic, where we've been in lockdown, it's been difficult to move forward with some of the ideas. But we have had architects on site drawing up plans. So there's a range of different plans that have been put on the table to go back to the community in the next phase to test out whether this is what people wanted in the first place. So I can't really show you those plans at the moment in this slide deck, but maybe in the future I might put up a different presentation that shows it. But for now, just try and get into your mind that this is almost like a campus idea of every type of wellbeing service you could possibly imagine all together in the same place. So it's a place where you go for health advice, but also for access to learning, for access for training, a place where you could meet people, a place where you could access good, healthy food, but also a place that when you got there, the place just talks about local heritage. It would feel as if it was a natural part of the Nantlle Valley. There'd be things in there like a sensory garden. You'd be able to go and access teaching, training, and access directly to healthy food. There'd be herb growing. There might be allotments nearby. So all these things, anything that you can think about that somehow contribute to well-being of people or the environment or the economy of the area, this would be a hub for all that to happen. And the key thing is obviously that this is all frameworked around the wellbeing goals from the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. And it obviously involves a lot of different partners. And the key thing is that each of these partners all has a different tradition coming from it. So I come from a health tradition. So when I look at wellbeing, I'm already imbued with lots of different theories, models, constructs, and belief systems within me about what health and wellbeing are about. And I can recognise other sectors' contribution. I don't really understand wellbeing in the same way that they do. Colleagues that work in the arts understand wellbeing in a very different way than I do. Similarly, those that are working on issues of vibrant culture and thriving Welsh language, they have a very specific understanding of well-being from that point of view. And I can recognise it. It doesn't quite fit at the moment with my view of health and well-being. And just try and think this through a little bit. Think about the old parable of describing an elephant to somebody that's blind. So if there were 4 people all trying to describe an elephant to somebody that had never seen an elephant, a person stood at the front of the elephant, looking straight at its face, would have a very different image and be able to talk about very different things than the poor person stood at the back of the elephant just looking at the tail, or one that stands from the side or one from above. We all have a slightly different perspective from where we stand, and that's exactly the same with the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act and any project that is coming out of the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. All the partners come at it from a slightly different perspective, and it's crucial that we start to try and unpick some of that to get a more holistic view across all partners, just so that we don't miss each other at all in the conversations. And it's easy to do because there's lots of the words that are used that are familiar to every sector, but we use them in slightly different ways. So for example, prevention. Within the world of health, and particularly public health and health promotion, my background, prevention is a very specific construct. I always in my mind go back to particular constructs around primary prevention, secondary and tertiary. And in fact, the model that we use in public health goes further than that. We talk about primordial prevention, primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. Now, people in public health would understand that, and you wouldn't need to talk about that so much because it's almost like it's become the norm what we talk about. We do know the difference between primary and secondary prevention. But I'll go into another sector, and whilst we use the same word prevention, we probably use different constructs. So in social care, we talk about universal provision and targeted prevention. In the crime and justice system, they have very similar models of prevention, but slightly different as well. So using this just as a key point, that even when you get underneath the goals of the Wellbeing Act and you look at the underlying principles, all the partners apply the principles in slightly different ways. And it's really important to get the conversation going across partners of what do you mean by prevention then? And what is long-term in your sector? In my sector, it's this. In your sector, it's that. And long-term is a really good one to use here. So for the natural environment sector, long-term, when we talk about trees and we talk about agriculture, is really long-term. In human health terms, long-term usually comes down to, survival rates for the next 5 or 10 years. Pushing it to the next generation and future generations is difficult for some sectors, but actually for other sectors, that's exactly what they're doing, looking at longer term futures. So it's really important to talk, communicate, but not just push your agenda and push your perspective and try and drown out other people's perspectives. This really is about opening up a proper communication and trying to develop. I've used the illustration here that comes from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, this idea of a Babel fish, something you could put in your ear and it would instantly translate other people's language. And that's exactly what we need to do in partnerships, understand each other's language and find a way of communicating across our professional and discipline barriers. So what I'm trying to talk about here, and this is particularly from a health point of view, within public health, we already have models that suggest to us that health is not improved by focusing on health services. We know from the social determinants of health model that it's actually health and well-being will be created by changes in agriculture and food production, education, the work environment, employment issues, water and sanitation, housing, as well as healthcare services. So we've already know that all these other sectors in the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act are absolutely crucial for us from a public health point of view. Whilst a lot of public health sits in the health sector, actually what it needs to develop and change are all those things in the other parts of the wheel of the wellbeing activities. So because of this, a lot of what public health is about has been trying to work with other sectors through partnership and put health onto their agenda. What sustainable development tells us is this is actually a two-way process. It's not about us trying to set everybody else's agendas. It's about taking those agendas and putting them into our own work as well. So it is an absolute exchange. So partnership is all about the give and the take. The give and the take and communicating what you're giving and taking and trying to just build across all the different partnerships. Not try and drown each other out that your perspective about well-being is more important than another sector's perspective. It's about trying to work out what the higher goal is across all of them together and what you each put into that part. So always looking for the win-win-win. So it's always about an exchange and the win being well-being for everybody. And this is easy to say, but in practice it's quite difficult, particularly because all these sectors all have, often at the heart of them, highly paid professionals, and they're highly paid because they're highly experienced. So I've spent 30 plus years in public health. I know public health backwards. So when I go into a room and we get onto an agenda which is somewhere around something that I know, there's always a tendency to put myself out there, become the expert in the room, talk to other people. And of course, what we're talking about in sustainability and with the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act is that everybody's an expert in that room. Everybody, community are experts in their experience and their lived lives. Everyone is equally important and has the right to be leading discussions. And that's often difficult when we've got so much to say because we've got a lot of knowledge and experience built up. So the key thing is learn to dance. And it's took me a long time to learn to dance from a partnership point of view, to sometimes keep my own mouth shut. It's not always about me leading the dance. And certainly it shouldn't always be about public health leading the dance, even when it's something around well-being, nor any other sector. So the first thing is, even if you think you're a great dancer, understand that you're not always leading the dance. Sometimes you've got to sit in the corner and wait to be asked. And then, when asked to contribute into a partnership programme, not then get up out of your seat and lead the dance again. Sometimes you have to follow. So sometimes we lead, sometimes we follow. And sometimes we just sit the dance out waiting to have a contribution. And sometimes it's not even about joining in the dance anyway. Sometimes it's about just providing the beat and the backdrop, providing the information, providing the music. So partnerships, I think, are absolutely about dancing. And it's something that we really do need to start to learn, that we're not all John Travolta. Some of us don't dance very well. And the key point is that, of course, dance isn't about something that one person does. Mostly it's about how do you work with the other dancers in the room. So that's a very quick run through, and I've only really made 2 points, one about communication and the other about the give and the take and the dance with other partners. I'm very happy to follow this through with further conversations with people. If you want to email me, those are my 2 email addresses. And in particular, if you want to know about either my research work, unpacking community development, see how that works to produce health outcomes, or the project, which is a wonderful project in the Nantla Valley. Thank you very much.